We'll get started now. Thanks for joining us this evening. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to talk about a planned upcoming street maintenance project on Alta Vista Road, and specifically to get some input from the neighborhood on the city's planned approach to the street maintenance. Excuse me. My name's Derek Bailey. I'm with the city's traffic engineer, and I'm temporarily filling in as managing the street maintenance group now, as we had a retirement recently. With me tonight is Nami Vong, and she's going to be facilitating the Q&A at the end of our presentation. Shouldn't take very long, maybe 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. We are going to record this webinar, and we'll send out a link so that if anybody wants to come back and watch it over again for your viewing pleasure. But let's get started. It's just an outline for this evening. We're going to talk about the planned maintenance approach, the neighborhood planning document that speaks to the type of restoration that's preferred in the neighborhood. Some of the funding constraints that the city has right now that's affecting the way we're planning to approach this project, and how you can provide input, next steps, and we'll have time for question and answer at the end. So the location of the planned maintenance project is on Alta Vista Road, and the project will start at Anapamoo Street, right at the high school entrance, and go up to the intersection of Grand and Jimeno, right where the Alta Vista ends and it turns into Jimeno. There's a planned utility undergrounding project in that vicinity on Jimeno. And so we don't want fresh utility cuts in a freshly paved street. So that's where this maintenance project will end. Alta Vista Road, I'm sure you're aware, is mostly a concrete street. The picture shown on your screen here just shows it's quite deteriorated, lots of stress and cracking on the street, ride's pretty rough. And we do get a lot of requests for maintenance on Alta Vista. And so the planned approach is to, instead of redoing the street in concrete, to do it with asphalt. And I'll talk about kind of how that'll happen. So step one would be to remove some of the unstable pieces of concrete that wouldn't make a suitable underbase underneath the asphalt. And then do what we call an edge grind. So these little, if we're looking at a cross section of the street right here, off to the side of the street, we would grind down a little bit. We would leave enough room that it would be like a gutter on a typical street. Step two, we would add something called a geogrid where needed. And what happens is if you pave over a concrete street, in time, the cracks that are in the concrete street, they'll reflect up into the asphalt street, and they'll eventually show up in the asphalt as well, exactly where the cracks are in the concrete. So if we put down a geogrid fabric, that creates some stability underneath, so those cracks won't reflect up to the top of the asphalt. And then finally, we would pave the street with asphalt, and we would add a slight crown to the street, so the middle of the street is a few inches higher just to shed water off. It's a pretty typical approach in Santa Barbara to pave asphalt over concrete streets. This is a map of the city, and everything you see here in color is a concrete street, and just about everything in green is asphalt that's been paved over top of concrete. Concrete makes a really good base. It's really expensive to fix, and so over time, that's why most of these streets have been redone in asphalt instead of concrete. So again, that covers most of our downtown area. These streets were originally concrete and are now asphalt. So for your neighborhood, there is a neighborhood planning document called the Lower Riviera Special Design District. You can see in the map here, the outline in blue shows limits of that. Alta Vista Road is over here on the right. And so you can see most of Alta Vista Road is contained within the neighborhood. And this neighborhood planning document says that street repairs, street cuts, etc., should attempt to restore to the street to prior condition, i.e. no repairs of concrete streets with blacktop, etc. Now it does say should, not shall. So if this said streets shall be repaired in concrete, that's kind of absolute. Only city council could then go back on a policy that they've made. But what should means is this is what we should do unless there's a really good reason not to. And that kind of segues into the next slide here is the funding constraints that the city has in terms of infrastructure maintenance. Removing and replacing Alta Vista with concrete in kind versus repairing it with asphalt in the method I just described, it probably cost about 10 times as much. So to do those 4 blocks of Alta Vista is probably a $2 to $3 million project, whereas if we pave the street with asphalt, it's probably more like 200 to 300,000. 2 to 3 million is pretty significant, and it's not something that we could absorb into the street maintenance program right now without significant other projects that would have to get deferred. We do have a very large street maintenance backlog. Fiscal year 2025, which begins July 1st this year. Street maintenance funding is projected to be 17 million, but that's a reduction of 1/3 from this fiscal year. Just to give you a sense for how much money ideally we would be spending to get our streets into a state of good repair, just for pavement, not including sidewalks, curb gutter, everything like that, order of magnitude like 23 to 25 million. So we're not keeping up as it is right now. So that's why we're looking to do repairs as efficiently as possible. So questions we often receive when it comes to kind of the finances of the streets fund and street maintenance funding is, for example, why spend so much on bike paths? Why can't some of that funding be used for street maintenance and repairing things in the way that the neighborhoods prefer? Bike paths, including some of the ones that have been recently constructed, like Las Positas, Modoc, etc. Those are funded through grants, either through the state or the county, sometimes the federal government. We use and rely on grant funding for those types of projects so that local money can be used and directed towards street maintenance. What about Measure C, which is a very good question. Measure C was a 1 cent on the dollar sales tax that was passed by the voters about 6 years ago. And Measure C generates about $30 million per year. As I mentioned, street maintenance funding needs are probably in the 23 to 25 million a year. Currently about 15 million, or for next fiscal year, 15 million of Measure C will go towards street maintenance. We're seeing reduced amounts going towards street maintenance in the future. What's going to happen soon is the police station is going to be soon under construction, and the city is going to borrow money, bond, for the construction of the police station, and the debt service, the payments for the police station are going to come out of Measure C, and that's probably going to be $7 to $8 million per year. So that $30 million a year that Measure C generates right off the top, about 8 million is going to come off. And then there's other things that Measure C funds as well, facilities maintenance, parks projects, some police and fire operations. What about gas tax? That's a very good question. California has among the highest gas taxes in the country. The state remits about $4 million a year to the city for gas taxes, so it certainly helps our operations a lot, but it is a fairly small amount compared to the overall need. So that's just some of the questions we typically receive, but we're happy to answer any more. So really the purpose of tonight is just to describe our planned approach with asphalt. Just to let you know that there is this neighborhood planning document that states that the preferred method is with concrete, and that the concrete is quite an expensive repair, and it's not something that we'll likely be able to do anytime soon. So we'd really appreciate your input on this. This is your neighborhood, and we want to respect that. The best way to provide input, either in a few minutes with Q&A, or you're welcome to ask questions, but you can email us. That's the best way to get your input recorded. We've created a special email address, altavista@santabarbaraca.gov, and I'll leave that up there for a minute. What's going to happen is we're going to just wait a few weeks for emails to come in, people to provide their input. And we're just going to try to get a temperature from the neighborhood on where everyone stands with this. Is there a consensus to move forward with the paving, the way I described it earlier? Or is there a consensus to defer the project until there is funding available to do it, the repair in concrete? Or somewhere in between. And if it's somewhere in between, we'll likely have to get our elected officials to give us some direction on how to proceed. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation, very short. If you want to ask questions on the bar, I think it's probably down below on your screen. You can raise your hand. That's how to verbally ask questions if you'd like to speak or provide an opinion. Or there's a button that says Q&A. I think it's down below right here on your screen, and you can ask a question in the chat and we'll answer those. And again, we would really appreciate you emailing us as well. Again, altavista@santabarbaraca.gov. And that concludes my presentation. Nami, is there any questions or anyone want to speak?
So far, not right now.
Okay.
Again, just click the Q&A button or raise your hand and I'll be able to ask you to unmute to speak.
Thank you. We'll just give it a minute to see if anybody has questions.
Yes, so Shelley Curry has raised her hand. Shelley, I'll allow you to speak. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, I had a question. In fact, I had emailed you and you were very kind to forward the email to the traffic department. And I was wondering, I never heard a response regarding the problem at the intersection of Colina and Alta Vista, where the road is sinking actually due to all the construction in the middle of the road that's gone on over the past 20+ years. And so now the sidewalk's sinking, the street's sinking, and as a result, my stone wall is sinking. So I'm wondering if there are plans to address that, or if I should just keep emailing.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We haven't had a chance to respond to all the emails that have come in to date. I do remember seeing your email, and I've talked to our street maintenance crews about it. I don't believe they've had a chance to go investigate yet, but we will get back to you soon on that one, just to let you know what can be done.
Okay, thank you. I'm concerned with all the rain that the problem's going to grow. So I appreciate any updates.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have an opinion on pavement versus concrete?
I prefer
not to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, because I look at it every day. Mm-hmm. I prefer the concrete, but I understand how prohibitive the costs are. I think the important thing is to get the street paved, and my first choice, concrete. But if that's not possible, then asphalt it is. And when I look at the street, there's really only a small patch left of concrete. Compared from Anapamu up to Mitchell Terena, because it's been patched so much.
Yeah.
So I kind of missed your comment regarding part of it would be concrete and part of it wouldn't, or could you repeat that again, please?
Oh, sure. I'll back up a little bit. So if you're looking at the screen, this red line is the map of where the project would take place. And so, yeah, your recollection is very good. There's been a lot of asphalt patches on the street already, particularly this first block north of the high school is been asphalted already. The rest of the street is kind of a mix. It would be the entire street from the high school. This would get repaved. And then the existing concrete street areas between Victoria up to Jimeno would get asphalt over the concrete.
Oh, okay.
And I was just describing with these slides right here, the difference between what we're planning to do this time and what's been done in the past is there's been a lot of patches done, and we call it like a leveling course. So it's just kind of a really thin layer of asphalt that just kind of smooths out some of the really big undulations in the road. This would be actually kind of a more thorough paving job. So we would be grinding off the top of the concrete, removing some of the unstable pieces, putting down a fabric so that the concrete is a stable base, and then paving over it with asphalt with some thickness so it'll last.
Oh, okay. That sounds fair.
So it will be a good repair. It's just the appearance of the street is definitely not consistent with that neighborhood planning document.
Yeah, I know. My house is a house of merit, and so I know all that's involved there. That, it would be nice if it were concrete, but these days it's difficult.
Yep.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you. Thanks for your help.
Thank you.
And then, so we have one question in the chat. Randy Wright asked, is the 10 times cost solely the immediate replacement cost, or does that include the lifetime cost of the paving?
Really good question. It is an immediate cost. And so there are life cycle analyses that can be performed comparing asphalt to concrete. And over time, that cost starts to even out a little bit. It still typically does favor asphalt. However, the challenge we always run up against is the upfront cost to make the repair. Unfortunately, we aren't able to set up our finances in a way that we can amortize that cost over the life of the structure. It's an upfront cost.
Okay, and then we have one raised hand from Clay Cole. Clay, I'll allow you to speak. Please unmute.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sorry for just joining, but time slipped away. I understand your financial constraints, and as disappointing as that is, it's really a larger issue. And I think certainly, given what you've outlined in the memo and the discussion we had when you called, that paving it makes sense rather than waiting 5 years, paving it with asphalt or repaving it, and then not having an answer. So assuming we go forward with this, or you do, with resurfacing with asphalt as you've described, and I've understood, I have a couple of different questions. One is that you made it clear that you'd be grinding down near the edges, near where the concrete curbs are, so the new asphalt pavement would flush out with the footing for the curb that extends a foot or so into the street, or less than a foot perhaps. And so the question I have is that this street is so badly broken up, and without trying to be injurious with the statements, it's really to say it's a third world street is kind of a stretch, really. And so I'm glad, and I'm sure a number of people are glad you're taking action to repair it. But it has so many broken up edges in the middle. Are those also going to be ground down flush and maybe sealed or filled in some way, the cracks, before you lay new asphalt? Because asphalt, it's, like painting over something that's a leaking mark or something. Asphalt over cracked concrete tends to have those cracks emanate up through the asphalt, in relatively short period of time. So that would be one question. Relatedly, how long would you expect the asphalt to last in this new surfacing? How many years under normal conditions, being and raining? And I understand the budget constraints, but can you also address, in the event, because asphalt doesn't last forever, and the more it rains, the more wear it has, and the more traffic, the more wear it has. So in the event that it has an estimated life, is it your expectation in the cities that you would be trying to budget in doing the complete job in some 5 or 7 years, whatever it would be, whatever number of years it would be before you would be expecting to have to deal with this surface again?
Yeah, good questions. Yeah, if you didn't have a chance to join us right from the beginning, I'll just jump back in. Are you watching this online, or are you just on the phone, Clay?
No, I'm online.
Okay. So you can see my screen then. So
yes.
These little graphics here, they just kind of illustrate our planned approach. So if this is a cross section of the road, this would represent an edge grind. As far as the middle of the road that's deteriorated, it really depends on how stable those remnant concrete pieces are. Concrete can make a very good base as far as something to pave over. It's stable. It's generally not going to go anywhere. So it is something that can work very well to pave over top. But it does have to be stable.
Just the uneven edges. I would not expect you to rip all that up, because that's what you said you can't do.
Some of it will have to get ripped up. There does appear to be some pieces that would not be good candidates to leave under there, because it probably will move around a little bit. But step one is to grind the edges down. Step two, and remove some of those less stable pieces. Those would be backfilled with a base. Step two then is to put over top what's called a geogrid, and it's almost like a fabric, like a really durable, thick fabric. And that geogrid fabric, that prevents what you were talking about. We call it reflecting. So when there's cracks in the concrete, it reflects up to the surface through the asphalt. So a geogrid, what that does is it stabilizes things underneath, and it really limits the amount of reflecting up that can happen. It's been used for decades and decades successfully. It's a proven way to do it. And then finally would be the asphalt top. Now, as far as how long we would expect this to last, just about any well-maintained asphalt structure should last about 30 to 40 years. And when I say well-maintained, that's where preventative maintenance comes in. So about every 7 to 10 years, ideally, a street should have a slurry seal on it. What happens naturally with asphalt is it does start to develop some fine cracking. And when water starts to get in to those fine cracks, that accelerates deterioration of the pavement structure. So every 7 to 10 years, if you can crack fill and then slurry seal over top of it, it seals up those distress points, and it just extends the life of the pavement structure. When we talk about paving something, it's kind of like we consider it in like dollars per square feet, kind of like you would put in a carpet in your living room. Paving is usually ballpark $5 a square foot, just depending on the preparation and how thick and everything you go. But rule of thumb, $5 a square foot. A slurry seal can be like 20 to 30 cents per square foot. So the treatment that you have to do every 7 to 10 years is a lot more cost effective than the initial paving. And so ideally, if city maintenance funding is like it should be, we're able to slurry seal streets on a regular basis. Your street, because it is on a bit of a hill, it can probably go a little bit longer than 7 to 10 years, just because the hill sheds water better than a lot of the flat streets that are closer to downtown. But that's the maintenance cycle. Anyway, you pave a street, and you can probably have about 2 to 3 slurry seals on it, and then it's time to pave the street again in 30 to 40 years.
Okay, thank you. I guess in terms of budgeting forward for the eventual day, one would hope when the city can afford to lay down new concrete. Is that something that's generally anticipated, or is it something that's just not in the cards?
Given our current street maintenance backlog, I don't foresee that ever being in the cards.
Well, particularly with 10 to 1, yeah.
Yeah.
Is the city, this is a little far afield, but is the city catching up on its capital expenditure backlog, and are we getting some of the federal monies that have been allocated or at least approved, if not yet allocated?
The answer is yes, we're catching up slowly. We have something that's called a pavement condition index, and it's kind of a 1 or a 0 through 100 scale of where we are. When we kind of hit our lowest point in funding in the late teens, 6 or 7 years ago, our pavement condition index was about a 60, and we're up to about a 66 right now. If you can get to the low to mid 70s, your average condition in the city is pretty acceptable. Obviously, some are going to be really good because they've been freshly maintained, and some will be a little bit lower, but on average. So yeah, we are making progress. And as far as the federal funding, the federal government doesn't make any funding available for basic maintenance like paving. But what they do make funding available for are things like bridge replacements. And so the city has a lot of bridges. We have a pretty large bridge inventory crossing all the creeks in the city. And there's a major project coming up in about a year on Upper De La Vina Street, for example, where it crosses Mission Creek about a block north of Alomar. It's old reactive aggregate, so in the event of a major earthquake, that bridge is unlikely to survive. So the federal government makes money available to replace important bridges like that. So that's
Will they also help with sewer system upgrades and replacements, or is that not something they will allocate money to?
generally not, no. If you get into a situation like Flint, Michigan or something like that, then they have been known to make money available for special repairs, but just as general practice, no. But what that bridge program does is it frees up money that the city can then use for more basic maintenance like pavement. So it is a big help.
Good. Where do you stand on this project now at this point? And is there anything more to do, or you're just sounding the public, or are you trying to get an affirmative signal?
Yeah, we're like I said, we're trying to get a temperature of the neighborhood for asphalt versus concrete. There is the neighborhood planning document that says the preferred method is concrete. So we just want to make sure that if we go against that, we have a consensus from the neighborhood that it's the right thing to do. And so right now we're just trying to get input, and over the next few weeks we'll be hopefully getting some more input and emails from folks in the neighborhood. We'll summarize that and send it back out in a few weeks and just let everybody know what we heard and what our planned path forward is.
Are you looking for a voice roll call here today, Derek, or are you just basically?
No, actually, we would really prefer if anyone does have an opinion that they email us at altavista@santabarbaraca.gov. We're happy to answer any questions right here, and if people want to come online like yourselves and share their opinion, but we would appreciate, just for the record, an email.
An email with an opinion one way or the other, I guess is what.
Yes, that would be most helpful.
Okay. Short and sweet would work, right?
Thank you, Clay. So Derek, we have one more question in the chat. And if you're just joining us, just a reminder, you can type in a question in the Q&A button or raise your hand on the bottom of your screen. And so the question in the chat is from Randy Wright. I think you might have answered this already. What material is the geogrid made of?
That's a good question. It's a fabric, but I don't know specifically what material. I will have to get back to you on that. If you send us an email at this email address, we'll research that and get you an answer.
Well, there's not any additional questions or hands raised right now. Oh, Randy said thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Randy. Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone's time this evening. Stay dry out there tonight, and please let us know what you think of our approach. We want to make sure we get this right in your neighborhood. So I look forward to hearing from you at altavista@santabarbaraca.gov. And if there are no more questions, Nami, I think we can wish everybody a good night. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.